I'm so excited to have you here today, Keziyah. Thanks for joining us and talking about your experience and sharing it with the Leopard community. I know, as I told you last time we chatted, ADHD, these are huge topics that our network is talking about a lot, just like how to approach the job search and the like disclosing at work and like what works and what doesn't and should they not. It's just I think we're all still learning and figuring out how to best approach this stuff. So I feel really lucky to have you here today. So I think we should probably start with a quick introduction, and then I'll sort of jump in and ask you questions, and I'll also read through the chat. And I'm just going to pin you. So if you want to just start with like a quick intro just about, your journey in tech, and we'll get into the autism and ADHD stuff soon. I think the way I phrased it was like, if you want to share your evolution to talking about this topic, because obviously you have an engineering career too. This isn't the only thing you do. So I think a bit about your journey would be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. Like, so cool to be here. So I'm Keziyah. I'm an engineer, currently working at Goalbook, which is an ed tech company. We basically make software for special education teachers. So I've been in tech about 6 years, and about a year and a half ago now, I decided to pursue an evaluation for autism and ADHD. And the reason that happened is because I was struggling at work with, just difficulty concentrating on tasks and, all the ADHD struggles. With on the autism side, like I've always felt like I've had like issues like connecting with people, and like I knew I had social anxiety, but I was starting to think like maybe it's more than social anxiety, maybe it's like something else. And I would notice some things coming up at work where, like, for example, my manager would give me feedback, but that feedback would be given in a way that's like kind of hinted, where like, if you know anything about autism, we tend to like take things pretty literally. So if you are hinting feedback at me, like, oh, I wonder why you didn't do this thing, or maybe you could have done that, like, I won't take that as like an actionable feedback item where I need to change. I will just take that as like you literally asking questions out of curiosity or whatever. So there were times when things like that would come up at work where I feel like, why didn't I understand what my manager was saying? Or why didn't I understand this thing that everyone else seems to understand? And so that and my ADHD struggles like kind of like affected my performance at work, and I got pipped, and it was this whole thing. And I was like, okay, I need to like see a professional and like get an evaluation and like figure out what's going on. So this was like late 2022, like October, November, when I like was getting the evaluation, and when I left that previous job, and when I got in touch with Lexi and the Leopard team, and they found me this great job at Goalbook. That's kind of a little about like why I became interested in autism and ADHD. Like it was literally like affecting my life and my livelihood. And so I was like, okay, I gotta like do something about this. And so now I'm pretty open about it. I talk about it often on LinkedIn, and how it affects just work in general. And it's something I talk about a lot because I'm hoping to kind of just normalize talking about it more and just like spread awareness about it. I mean, I didn't know this about myself until less than 2 years ago. There are like so many other people who still don't know this, who are still undiagnosed. And a lot of the research shows that if you're a woman, if you're a racial minority, you're less likely to be diagnosed. So it is important to like just like have more people talk about it. And so that's why I choose to talk about it. But yeah, I've been at Goalbook for a year and a half now. I'm pretty open about it with my colleagues at Goalbook. It's been great. So looking forward to answering some of these questions.
That is so great to hear that you've kind of taken this information and found a way for your workplace to feel even better, or like you've created a setup that feels more successful for yourself. So can you tell us a little bit just about, now that you know, think more about yourself, how have you changed your work environment to suit your needs better?
Yeah. So I work remotely, and I feel like that's like I know it's like a privilege, and I know a lot of companies are, forcing everyone to return to office, and that kind of sucks. But for me, that's been a huge thing. Since I started working in tech, I've only worked remotely. Just the ability to like control my environment is so huge. Just like controlling like how much noise I hear, or controlling like, if I want to get up and like walk around for a bit while I think, or if I want to take a break and go outside and just feel the sun on my skin for 10 seconds, then come back in, like just like having that control over like being able to, um, yeah, just like creating an environment where I can like think and concentrate. I feel like offices are just like so
Totally.
full for me. I don't have as many sensory issues as a lot of autistic people do, but I know that some autistic people, for example, they find like fluorescent lights to be very uncomfortable and even painful, or they're very sensitive to like different noises and things like that. And so those are things that you have control over when you work from home. So that's like a really big thing. And um, I can talk a little bit more about like disclosing it to like my boss and like how like I interact with her and how that helps me. Um,
I think that would be amazing. I feel like this is a success story of how to do it. And I mean, your boss is also pretty cool. So hopefully, I mean, but yeah, let's get detailed. And I had a question before, which was like, um, where did it go? It was, yeah, I think it's like you, yeah, I think let's start with the boss stuff. It's like there's so many things around communication. Oh, I remember what it was. It was examples of things that were confusing in your previous manager relationships. You were like, oh, an example of this, an example of that, but I actually wanted to hear like a full sentence example, because I'm sure other people will relate. You were almost like vague, but I bet you if you say something specific, people are like, oh, totally, I get confused by that too. So that was another one to just, the more specific the examples of that are, basically.
I didn't know this was feedback that I was given, like, oh, you should have, because it wasn't stated to me like, you should do XYZ, and I need you to do this because of blah, blah, blah. It was more like a hint. It was more like, oh, why didn't you do XYZ? Or why didn't you communicate this thing or something? I guess another example would be like, there are rules for things and procedures for things, but they're not written down anywhere. I might do something that goes against a procedure, but that procedure was never explicitly stated. Like, you need to do this way, or you need to contact this person before you reach out to that person. Implied, and people just know, like magically know
Yeah,
this
let's
invisible rule, but autistic people are less likely to pick up on those things because we need things to be
right.
explicitly stated or explicitly written down.
Yeah,
Um, so either I just don't know what the rule is, or I fill in the gaps and I just make up my own rules sometimes, but that doesn't always work. So
totally. Yeah, let's get back into the what you were about to cover, which is how you kind of disclosed with your manager and ways that you work together successfully now.
yeah, so the way I did it, I actually wouldn't recommend anyone do that. I'll get to that in a second. What I would recommend is like, I guess being super intentional about it, like, doing lots of Googling about disclosure and like looking at the laws and all that for them. I know there are like coaches, there are like autism coaches who coach you on how to disclose and things like that. Like that's what you should do. What
Cool.
I did, so we have in-person meetups twice a year. During one of those in-person meetups, we had open spaces, which if you haven't done it yet, it's like a like an open forum where people get up and like present on any topic that they want, basically. And so I got up there and I was like, I want to talk about autism and ADHD because I just got diagnosed a month ago. And so that was my disclosure to like my entire company of like 80 people. So don't do that. But
Why? What was the response like, or why do you feel that way?
well, the response was actually pretty good. So I mean, I work at a company that we make special ed like products, and like half of everyone who works there were former special ed teachers. So I feel like I got lucky with that because, these are people who are used to working with people with disabilities. And, um, you know, a lot of my colleagues joined my open space and talked about having ADHD. And we just had a really good conversation about it. And so I actually got like really good like feedback from everyone. But I've also heard like a ton of horror stories about people disclosing. And so I feel like I got very lucky and I did like a very impulsive thing, but I wouldn't recommend anyone else do that because it could actually turn out really poorly. Even with the ADA and the protections we have in this country, like people still get discriminated against. They still get pushed out of jobs for disclosing. So definitely be like extremely careful with that.
Totally. Wait, but you were about to get into the stuff with your manager and sort of how you've structured communication with her to be maximally effective.
Yeah, so she's been great, and she also like has disclosed to me that she also has ADHD, so like she gets it too, so that's really helpful. But she's always open to like feedback about how things could be done better. Like I've given her feedback on like meetings that we have and like how we could like structure meetings better, or how we could sometimes we have meetings that go like really, really long. And so like, I could give her suggestions that for like, maybe if we do some of the meeting work before the meeting so that when we get to the meeting, we can get to the, nitty-gritty stuff, like so that the meetings could be shorter and therefore I can like not like zone out as much. Things like that. Like she's always like really receptive. And then um, you know, I felt comfortable like asking her for more time on things. That's been like a huge struggle for me, just like feeling like I always need more time than other people to complete tasks because like ADHD means like it's just harder to get things done efficiently. But autism also, a lot of autistic people have trouble with like processing speed. Like it just takes us longer to process things and to work through problems. And so like more recently I've asked her like, can I have more time on these sets of projects, or can I have more time on this thing? And she's been pretty like um understanding about that. Yeah. And just other things like on my work calendar, I have uh like focus times blocked off. So there are like entire days or entire half days where no one can book a meeting with me. And like I've talked to my manager about that and why I wanted to do that. And she's been really supportive in that. Cause if I have like little meetings peppered throughout the day or throughout the week, like it just throws me off so much. Cause like there's a meeting time and then there's like the pre-meeting time where I can't really get anything done. And then there's post-meeting time where I have to like recover from the meeting, which sounds kind of silly, but if you're autistic, you might get it. So like I just
Totally.
have days blocked off where I just like don't have meetings, and that's just like that just helps me focus a lot more.
Those are good tips. While we're on that topic, I have listed like other tips or strategies. It sounds like you've sort of like gamed your schedule to make it work for you. Like other things that you've found like through experimentation to be really effective.
hmm yeah, just looking at my notes here. Like this is something I'm still kind of working out, but with ADHD specifically, like I call it like a bucket of tools. It's not a literal bucket, but it's just like a list of things that I try to remind myself that I have that can help me concentrate. Um, and they
Love.
don't always work all the time. I have to like switch them out and use different ones every once in a while. But things like, for example, like body doubling, which a lot of ADHDers know about, which is basically working alongside another person, which I don't do at home, but I might like just go to a coffee shop, or I might use a virtual body doubling service. I use one called Cave Day, where it's like you get in a
Goodness.
Zoom.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really great. Yeah. You just get in a Zoom with a bunch of other people and you just like work together, and it's super effective. Um, things like fidget toys or STEM toys like this that I have that I just like play with in my hand. I use YouTube a lot. I have YouTube on my other screen, just playing like those lawn care videos where people are just like doing lawn transformations. Like for some reason, that just having that playing while I'm working just helps me so much. Um, I have a
Like,
couple of hourglasses. Like this one's 15 minutes, so I'll just be like, okay, in 15 minutes, I have to like get this, send this email or do this little thing, and just like this visual reminder like helps keep me on task. Um, and yeah, I'm just like as I go on, I'm just kind of like figuring out like what else helps me, and just like adding that to my little bucket of tools, and just like I've got to remind myself to like actually use what's in my bucket because I forget about that too. But um,
somebody said that they like the lawn care video idea, adding that to the bucket too. And by the way, listeners, definitely write your questions in the chat if you have them as we're sort of getting through mine. But I feel like we're still sort of talking about this stuff as if it's like something you have to deal with. And is there a positive way you started to look at these traits or these things about yourself and turn them into superpowers at work or in life?
yeah, that's a really good question, and that's a like a huge debate within the neurodivergent community. Like, is it a disability? Is it a superpower? Is it both? I definitely consider it to be both, but it really depends on the day. Like sometimes it really just feels like, man, I can't get anything done. My brain doesn't work properly.
Probably.
I'm such a weirdo. Why am I different from everybody else? And then other days it's like, wow, my ADHD is great because I'm so creative and I do all these cool things. And, my spontaneity like helps me like, I don't know, have like really cool experiences. And yeah, so there is like a positive, there are definitely positive um traits about like autism and ADHD, both like within work, but also like outside of work. And but yeah, it depends on the day for sure. I've seen people reference some studies saying that like autistic workers are like more efficient, and things like that. Um, definitely not me, but I'm sure a lot of autistic people are. So
I
I
feel like
mean,
you're probably not giving yourself enough credit there. Like, one thing I was going to ask was you were talking about that you rolled out processes widely across your company. And I feel like I have learned a lot from people in our network who ask for more documentation generally. Like Leopard candidates always, I mean, not everyone, but they want to know more about the interview process, what to expect, how they should prepare. And I feel like there's something connected to some of the stuff you were saying about what to expect. So, like, has that come up for you at all around like being strong at documentation and being super clear in an asynchronous environment?
yeah. Yeah, speaking specifically about like company-wide processes, I do think that being autistic like helped in creating that. So last year, I basically headed the project that would create Goalbook's first incident response process because we didn't really have one before. So it was a company-wide thing. It involved like the engineering team and other teams. It involved like, I don't know, writing a bunch of docs and like having a bunch of meetings and having a bunch of workshops. And um, looking back on it, I feel like the way that I did it was like I did it very autistically, if that's even a word. Um, one of the theories about like how autistic brains work is that like um, that most people are like top-down thinkers. So most people can like grasp a concept from the top without knowing all the little details about the concept. And that autistic people are bottom-up thinkers. So in order for me to understand this concept, I need to understand all the little details in between from the bottom. And so I built out the incident response process from the bottom. Like I did a lot of research. I like had 7 or 8 different workshops. Like I like planned and hosted workshops within the engineering team and with people on other teams, like help us all together learn about different aspects about incident response. So things like communication and what an on-call schedule looks like, and incident response roles and all these different things. And so I did it in a way that was like very detailed and that like went through all the details with everyone on the team. And so it probably took a lot longer than it could have. I probably went into a lot more details than I could have. But because of all of that work, because I needed to do all of that in order for me to understand from the bottom up what incident response was and how to build an incident response playbook. And I got a lot of positive feedback about that process. And it's still something that we're using and something that we'll be using for years to come. So I feel like being autistic like helped me like with
Totally.
that process.
And sorry, I love what you're saying about from the bottom up, but could you almost give a list of like what that entails? Bottom up, does that mean like talking to all the stakeholders, explaining everything to them? Understand, like when you say understanding all the details,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah. So I guess what I did was, yeah, there was a lot of like meeting with different like meeting with the marketing team, meeting with the support team, meeting with our customer success teams, um, doing lots of research on like different aspects of like what a playbook, what an incident response playbook is, reading other incident response playbooks. And then like the bulk of what I did that first quarter that I worked on it was like hosting workshops. So I hosted 7 different workshops, and each workshop was like a different small chunk of what incident response is. So like the first one was like, this is an intro to incident response. And so it was like all of us in a room together, like learning about what incident response was and things like that. And then I had another
Cool.
workshop on like incident communication. And so we all
Mm.
together like worked through like, okay, this is how Atlassian does incident communication. This is how GitHub does incident communication. And then us coming together and figuring out like how we're going to do it at Goalbook. So like
Super
focusing, like
cool.
having those different workshops to focus on the little details of what incident response is, like
Mm.
helped all of us lead up to the
How
product,
we're
the
gonna
end
do it.
product, which was like the playbook.
I feel like that sounds really good from like everybody feeling on the same page and knowing what to expect and like
Mhm.
being able to make informed decisions. I don't know. Sounds like it worked. Wait, I want to make sure I'm loving this. I feel like we're getting really good info. Chat, let us know if there's anything you want us to clarify so far. My last questions were just honestly, it was, are there specific tools or resources? But I think we sort of covered that with your bucket. And then my last thing was just, we talk a lot about vetting companies in the Leopard network and how to determine with limited information if a company is probably a good place to work, if you're neurodivergent. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts or like red flags or little observations that maybe we can help people kind of integrate into their process of vetting employers.
This one's hard. I guess when I was applying for Goalbook, I wasn't thinking about autism and ADHD specifically because I didn't get my actual diagnosis until like late December, early January after I already like got the offer. I guess something I would have looked for was like definitely don't disclose during the interview process. Like I would not recommend, I mean, you can if you want, you can do whatever you want, but I would not. Like I just don't think that's a good idea.
Makes sense.
But what I would look for is like just general vibes around diversity stuff. Um, I remember when I was like in the Goalbook like uh virtual on-site interviews, like talking to people, talking to like the HR folks about like diversity and what are their plans for diversity, like how do you get feedback from employees, and that sort of thing just kind of gave me a general idea that like, okay, this company, like obviously like the people who work here really do care about diversity in general. And like Goalbook has the whole like anti-racism thing that they were doing a few years ago that they like continued even after like the protests of 2020, because I feel like a lot of companies like during 2020 and then they like stopped caring about racism. But Goalbook, we're definitely like continuing that. We just started like affinity groups for different populations, including a disability affinity group. So yeah, just like getting general vibes about diversity stuff, I think might be a good like indicator.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense. This was super awesome. I feel like we got a lot of good tips and tricks. And what I would love to do is just honestly take the recording. I'll share it with you for review, and then we'll see if people have additional questions and keep you posted in the chat.
Cool.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Can I ask a really quick question?
Yeah, totally.
Do you feel like sometimes, because a lot of people are very sensitive, right? They overthink too much. Do you feel like sometimes having ADHD helps you not overthink?
That's a good question. Not necessarily. I guess it's different for everyone.
Great.
I feel like sometimes my ADHD makes me impulsive, so impulsive decision, and that might prevent me from overthinking, but there are definitely times when I like second guess myself a lot. So I guess it depends on the situation.
Yeah, I also have a friend who has ADHD. I think he told me, because I was curious, because I'm a sensitive person, so I was like, then having that is must be a really good thing, because then you don't overthink, right? But he said because he has that, he sometimes can't understand other people, so he overthink about, like, he guess what do they really mean all the time, which is very tiring too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is a good point, that sometimes we just don't understand what people mean, or we're used to like not understanding what people mean, and that makes us like self-conscious about future interactions. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It's really good.
Totally. I'm also going to make a documentation, like a blog post about disclosure and the laws and what people should know. So I'll definitely send that your way. I feel like that's a straightforward thing we can do to help people. And then I love your bucket thing. I think we should write the bucket down. That's like my documentation brain being like, let's give everybody the bucket. Like,
yes, definitely.
Okay, this was super fun. Oh, disclosure doc would be fantastic. Cool. We can collaborate on that.